All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am ready to discuss the draft over the course of the last couple days, as well as some comments that were made last night by Ben Tenzer, John Wallace, the Denver Nuggets new brain trust at the front office spots. It was a low-key night all the way around, just like Wednesday night was a low-key night. And I am not surprised that this is happening. Also, not necessarily super concerned on the draft front that they weren't super involved, but ultimately still think that Denver probably is missing out on an offseason, a free agency, an opportunity to get themselves to be better. The most that Denver's going to be able to do is make themselves marginally better. And my personal opinion is that I don't think that is good enough. But that may not be shared by the Denver Nuggets organization. Actually, I think it's pretty clearly shared by the Nuggets organization, or at least the people that matter the most within said Nuggets organization. So we'll talk about it all. We will talk about what Denver can do. Shout out to Cedric. Cedric is in here. He says, Ryan jinxed us. Cody says, Ryan always brings that heat. Really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for stopping by. Tony B's in the comments. Nuggets are cooked next season because of, well, I'm not going to say that. Him is in here. Yo, Ryan, we've got the regulars here. Everybody's excited to hear about the experience. But the most important thing, how was the pizza? It was subpar. I'm not gonna lie. It's pizza, so you can't ever turn it down. Pepperoni was pretty good, but overall the quality was not perfect. But look, it is what it is. Denver, I thought, look, Nuggets PR last night had a pretty tough job. And the reason why is because they're trying to put out, I think, a pretty reasonable spot for everybody to hunker down, hang out. All they're doing is trying to communicate what the business is, what's going on without necessarily divulging too much information. They're trying to make everybody comfortable with very limited resources. And I don't have any qualms with how they handled it last night. That's for sure. But look, they're in a tough spot because we were coming to the draft with a very large expectation that nothing was going to happen, and lo and behold, nothing happened. That's just not really a surprise to me. So look, it is what it is. And I do think that Denver, they're going to be one of the losers of the draft because of decisions not made by this front office, but decisions made by the previous one, decisions made in order to give up these picks, not refilling the coffers, spending all of the future assets in order to not have any current assets is a choice. And it's tough that Denver's in this position. But honestly, as I said yesterday, that's also part of the process of being a championship team. Not everybody's going to look like the Oklahoma City Thunder from an asset perspective. It's actually very difficult to look like OKC from an asset perspective. So I'm not really surprised that Denver didn't have any picks. What's ultimately surprising is that there's just no flexibility. There's nothing there that they can really go to at this point. But we'll get into that in the second segment. No draft picks, of course, but we did get some news on a two-way contract player. Tamar Bates is coming in on a two-way contract via Tony Jones of The Athletic. And also Tamar Bates himself, who basically said it into a microphone for his entire party that was there supporting him in Missouri. Pretty cool, by the way, to see that if you haven't seen that video where he is sharing the news that he's going to be an NBA player with his crowd. And they were all extremely happy for him, which is cool. Tamar Bates is a 3-and-D guard wing, kind of in that 6'4" range. He's really a 3-and-D shooting guard. There are skills that he has, like he's a very efficient shooter, which is great for Denver. He gets some steals. he needs to be a better processor at the NBA level. He needs to be somebody who can speed up his reads and reacts of what is going to happen in the NBA. But if this is the kind of player that the Nuggets are going to be adding, I think that Denver should be pretty happy. That should be pretty solid. You want guys that are efficient. You want guys that are effective. And I think that Tamar Bates, we'll see what happens in Summer League and what he looks like. I don't want to put too much pressure on him because, like, look, this is the only, literally the only person that the Nuggets added to their roster is a two-way contract. That is a tough place for that two-way contract to be. But if he does work out and if he does provide that skill set of, hey, could shoot 40% at the 3-point line at the NBA level, that would be great. But those are high expectations immediately out of the gate. We will see what happens with him. We did get some news from Ben Tenzer and John Wallace that the Nuggets are expected and will likely, haven't confirmed it yet, will likely bring back some of the two-way guys that they had last year. Trey Alexander, PJ Hall, Spencer Jones. I think if I had to put the odds up there right now, it would be Trey Alexander and PJ Hall that they bring back, and Spencer Jones being the guy that they let go. But I could be wrong about that. And I like PJ Hall. I like Trey Alexander. Spencer Jones, he shot 1 of 17 from 3 in his very brief time. I think the Nuggets are worried about his 3-point shot. And so I'm not surprised if he's the one that they ultimately decide not to go forward with. With Trey Alexander, I think there is an expectation. G League Player of the Year last year. PJ Hall, somebody that they feel is a smart, high IQ offensive player that can make plays on both ends of the floor and is just a really solid rebounder. So if that is what you get from two-way contracts, I honestly don't think that that's that bad. Denver has not done a great job in recent years of committing to their two-way contract guys, whether it's Jay Huff as previously talked about, whether it was Trey Alexander and PJ Hall and Spencer Jones last year. Those guys effectively combined for about 300 total minutes in the NBA. And so I'm not surprised that Denver has not gotten a lot of guys to come back to Denver for the second year on a two-way contract. But if they are able to do so this time around and basically say, hey, guys, we're going to commit to play you. We're not going to play Nikola Jokic 2,800 minutes like we did this past year. Christian Brown's not going to play as many minutes as he did before. Then maybe there is an opportunity for those other young guys on the end of the bench to get in on a more regular basis. I'm not going to sit here and predict that. That is a David Adelman thing. And I just realized that's the question that I forgot to ask last night. How involved was David Adelman in the draft process? What was his input on various things? I wonder whether he was actually involved at all, because Denver didn't have a pick. There wasn't anything major there, but who knows? Maybe that was all part of the collaborative process that they have instilled now. But I'm very curious what Tamar Bates is going to bring to the table, whether he's going to get an opportunity or not. We will ultimately see. Jimenez asks, Ryan, did you see the Masai news? I did. I saw that come through. Not surprising. He was in the final year of his contract, and I had heard that the seat was a little bit hot for him prior to now. And that sometimes happens when you're the GM of a team for 12 years, like he has been. He was there ever since 2013 when the Nuggets let him go. So, I mean, would it be cool for him to have come back to Denver? Sure. Based off of what I've heard of what the Nuggets are trying to prioritize within their front office, he wasn't ever going to really be a candidate. One, because he costs too much, and two, because he commands a lot of power. And the Nuggets are probably not going to be that kind of team going forward with their front office structure. But yeah, Masai has been sneaky bad for Toronto over the course of these past few years. Ever since they won a championship, they like I complain about Denver kind of slowly falling into a repeatable pattern that's not necessarily great. Toronto has done that a ton. So like I wouldn't necessarily be that miffed if I were a Nuggets fan about missing out on the opportunity to hire Masai Ujiri. They weren't going to. That was not something that they would ever consider. So look, it is what it is. But I do think that Denver will be fine. Uh, in terms of other things that have happened in and around the draft, there was a report that came out today that Cam Whitmore is available from the Houston Rockets via trade, which makes it really funny that Houston is not going like that. They didn't sign or they didn't send him for along with Kevin Durant in that Kevin Durant deal. Phoenix should be ashamed of themselves for not being able to get Cam Whitmore if they were going to trade him anyway. They could have taken two second round picks and taken on Cam Whitmore instead, but c'est la vie. There's going to be some interesting moves made. There weren't moves made at the draft that I was really expecting. I think everybody, and I talked about this yesterday, I think a lot of people were expecting the draft to have a lot of fireworks. Usually we hear that a lot, but I do think that with how much pressure there is on the salary cap right now, there's going to be a lot of trades and moves made potentially in these next 2 days. I'm doing a podcast right now on Friday because I'm not expecting the Nuggets to make any moves. But I do think that there is at least a pretty strong possibility that teams like Philly set themselves up to make some moves. Teams like Brooklyn certainly has some flexibility with the Cam Johnson deal. The Lakers are in a position where they need to create some space, and they're trying to come up with their starting center. There's a lot of teams. The Clippers are going to be very aggressive, although they missed out on Kevin Durant. I think that there's going to be a lot of trades and a lot of activity leading up to free agency. How many are actually executed, we will see. But I do think that Denver is going to be on the sidelines for that. As I've discussed, as I have shared, as we heard from the front office last night, the Nuggets are not going to be super involved. That's not what they're trying to do. They are not trying to rock the boat, specifically this offseason. They are trying to add some free agency additions. They're not really focused on trades. And there's a variety of reasons why I think that that's bad, particularly because you're not using the end of your roster that well. But who knows? The thing that everybody needs to remember is that not all 15 players need to play. The problem is that with Deron Holmes' injury last year, with DeAndre Jordan becoming their ninth man suddenly, with Dario struggling, with Hunter Tyson being bad, with Zeke Naji being up and down, is that Denver had too few guys that could play. They need to find that balance where at least like 12 to 13 of their guys can play in the regular season. And right now, I don't think they're there. I think if you look at, and Cody says it here, I really hope we can get off Tyson, Naji, Saric contracts. I understand that sentiment completely. I think that those guys in particular are in a really tough place trying to work their way back into the Nuggets rotation after the way the last couple of years have went for Zeke, for Hunter Tyson. We'll see what it ultimately looks like, but Denver, of course, needs the shooting to actually hit. They need the defense to actually be good. They need the smarts, and they need a lot more than I think they need. But that's the rub on this front. I think they are wrong. But when we come back, we're going to talk about it. There were some positions and some skill sets that were outlined last night in terms of what the Nuggets will be focusing on, what they're going to be trying to add. I will be taking you through both those skill sets and some names that I think you should match the Nuggets to. We'll talk about that next here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. Uh, Real quick, I went over. If you go over to milehighsports.com, if you're watching on the TV or on the computer, go pull it up on your phone. I wrote an article. Expect another quiet offseason for the Denver Nuggets after the NBA draft. In that, I shared a lot of the quotes that I'm going to share now. This is going to be some good context, I hope, for a lot of people. That's at least the hope. John Wallace had this quote: "This team is kind of where they are. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for us at this time to jump in, get draft fever. It's one of the reasons why they didn't add another draft pick." And I totally agree. I really totally agree on that. If they're not going to make major trades, you're probably expecting guys like Hunter Tyson, Zeke Naji, Dario Saric at the end of the roster to probably, at least in part, to stay there. Not sure if that's going to be everybody involved, but it is going to be some of those guys. Quote, "We were able to kind of sit back and assess what the landscape is, and we'll try to make some other decisions from here." They added Tamar Bates. That's a 3-and-D guard that they are looking for. Tenzer shared, quote, "I think we're always going to be aggressive looking at everything, but I think we'll probably focus more on free agency than trades." Wallace added to that sentiment with some skill sets. One, bench depth. I've said it before, some more scoring on that second unit. Shooting, obviously, is one of the needs. And if we can, also try to find better point of attack defenders. Try to get the bench to support our starting lineup. And I totally understand that sentiment. I personally think that a backup center wasn't really mentioned. They did talk about what they need at center, but I think that is lower on their priority based off of what we heard last night. Okay. Second unit scoring, outside shooting, point of attack defense. Let's look at some different players that might be available for those kinds of skill sets. Let's talk about that. These are names that I've talked about before, a lot of them, but names that I think people should have at the front of their mind when discussing the Denver Nuggets. Among this free agency class, the best point scorers per 100 possessions that the Nuggets might be able to add. I basically took, if you played over 2,000 minutes last year, you're probably not going to be a Nugget, but Denver needs at least a decent sample size. So these are the names that I put out there. Trey Mann of the Charlotte Hornets, guard, scoring guard. Chris Boucher of Toronto, higher volume scorer than I think people realize on a per 100 basis. Also, Sandro Mamukelashvili, who I kind of joke about for San Antonio, but if you guys I invite you, and maybe I should honestly be the one to do this because I'm the professional, but comparing Chris Boucher's stats, who's very known, who's been in the league for a while, with Sandro Mamukelashvili, who has a crazy sounding name to us Americans and isn't necessarily somebody that's at the front of the mind. Sandro and Chris Boucher have near identical profiles as a front court scorer. And so that's a name that I wouldn't mind. If Denver could get him on the minimum, get Mamu, that would be great. Honest, I genuinely believe that. And so if you're trying to find bargain bin guys, if you're trying to find players that fit the profile of what Denver's looking for, that's one to think about. So keep it, if you hear Mamu, you know where to come. You know where to come and congratulate me. So you've got Trey Mann, Chris Boucher, Mamu, Malcolm Brogdon, and Kevin Porter Jr. Now, Kevin Porter Jr. went through a DV case. I'm not going to deal with that. I don't want to. So we're crossing him off the list. But Malcolm Brogdon is somebody that I think Denver would obviously consider. They're going to have some competition for him. But he was surprisingly a higher volume scorer than I think I remembered from last year. So would be a good leader for the Nuggets second unit. The best outside shooters, guys that I'm really focusing on volume here as well as 3-point efficiency. Denver just needs players that can get up shots. They would like guys that can make shots, so you find the right mix between those two skill sets. But Denver needs guys that can get up 3-pointers. Sam Merrill of Cleveland, Alec Burks of Miami, a veteran former CU buff. Sandro Mamukelashvili pops up here again. Like, you guys don't understand. I'm gonna pull up his numbers actually and just really try to explain it to people. He shot 50% from the field last year, 37% from three, which sounds okay, whatever. Um, per 100 possessions, he attempted 11.4 3-pointers per game. 11.4. That would be the highest on the Nuggets, I think. That's crazy. But if you're looking for a pick and pop five, if you're looking for somebody that can space the floor at least a little bit, that's at least like something to think about. And he had a 62.8 true shooting. So like very efficient. Secretly really good. He's not going to help you on defense, but he's going to help you on offense. That's for sure. Okay, going back to this. Sandra, so Mamu, Aaron Holiday, another higher volume 3-point shooter than I think a lot of people understand. He has a team option with Houston, and the more I think about it, the more I think they're going to decline that. Now, that might not actually happen, especially if they trade Cam Whitmore away. But something to think about with the Houston Rockets situation between Cam Whitmore and between Aaron Holiday, Denver should try to get one of those guys. Those guys would be good in Denver. Gary Trent Jr., another guy that Denver should be targeting, 3-and-D wing, somebody that's a pretty easy fit with whatever Denver's trying to do. And then Doug McDermott, if they're looking for kind of an end of the bench shooter, somebody that could come in and change the game every now and then, he would be a great minimum target. Also for my guy, Vinny Benedetto, who's a Creighton guy. Okay, those are some names as just scorers and shooters. Now, perimeter point of attack defenders, focusing on steal rate, overall kind of level of disruption. I've got 5 names for you. Davion Mitchell, restricted free agent with Miami. I don't expect him to leave there. I don't expect Denver to be able to afford him. But on the off chance that they decide to do something dumb, try to go get Davion Mitchell. DeAnthony Melton of Brooklyn. This is a name that I've been floating for a while. A perfect minimum candidate. Somebody that tore his ACL last year, needs a place to become the better version of himself. And he could get back on the market and get Jokic to set him up from a 3-points perspective. So like that would be, I think, a really good fit for Denver. Gary Harris, surprisingly disruptive by the metrics for Orlando. I do think that was kind of bolstered by having a great amount of good defensive personnel around him. If he was in Denver, he would be a little bit more stressed out because Denver doesn't have as many great defenders, but I can see some lineups with Gary Harris on the ball and Christian Brown and Peyton Watson off the ball, like some lineups there that could potentially help Denver become a better defensive team. Gary Payton II for Golden State, I kind of just expect them to bring him back, but if they don't, then he's somebody to mention. And then DeLon Wright of New York, probably washed at this point, but also if he's not, that's a good end of bench guard to have. So look, this is me trying to do the job. This is me trying to share as many names as I possibly could. The expectation that I have for Denver is that they look at their own free agents, whether it's Russell Westbrook, Vlatko Čančar, DeAndre Jordan. They make a decision on those guys as to whether to bring them back or not. If they don't, if Denver is adding 3 new guys, then I think you could probably pick from 2 of the names on this list and then expect that Denver has to go for lower in the bargain bin for the 15th name. That would be my pretty reasonable expectation, I think, on this. I don't expect Denver to have all hits in free agency. And honestly, people shouldn't either, because it's just I know that people are like, yeah, everybody has a lot of high expectations for the Nuggets front office, but like these are small contracts that Denver's able to throw out there. And a lot of these guys are going to be able to get minimum contracts and go to like LA or go to Phoenix or go to Miami or go to a Orlando who has a great practice facility or something like that. Like it's just a lot of competition that the Nuggets are facing right now. So I don't blame the front office for not being able to get certain guys in the door, but they have to get some. So if you're going for a shooter or if you're going for a scorer, let's say it's Trey Mann. Like that would be pretty straightforward, I would say. Let's say the shooter that you're getting is Alec Burks. And let's say the defender that you're getting is Gary Harris. Trey Mann, Alec Burks, Gary Harris. It's a pretty obviously guard-focused crop. Denver would be pretty small at that point if they were to do that. It's kind of why I think you're looking at Chris Boucher, Sandro Mamukelashvili. Maybe there's another big that Denver could get. Maybe they only get two of those guys. They get like Trey Mann and Alec Burks, and they get instead Daniel Tice or Marvin Bagley III or somebody of that nature. Marvin Bagley could help them score. He's not going to help them defend, but he could definitely help them score. And if that's the case, if Denver's going to go with that as their mix, that's the healthy expectation that I think Nuggets fans should have at this point. You should not be looking at trades. As much as I looked at trades, as much as I talked about trades, the only reason I did that was to try to outline scenarios. It's not because I thought it was going to happen. I kind of wish it would. I kind of wish Denver would be a little bit more focused on improving their top level as opposed to just like saying, hey, we've got a great starting lineup. We just have to add around them. I honestly don't know if that's true. I don't know if Denver, like there is this sentiment that Denver has the best core four or the best starting lineup in the NBA. At least that is the sentiment that is being put out there, kind of projected by the Nuggets. And I don't know if that's fair to them. Like in the playoffs each of the last couple of years, there have been struggles. Like Denver's needed guys like Russell Westbrook and Peyton Watson, and before like last year, Justin Holiday, Christian Brown, in order to step up to come in off the bench and really help what was a pretty struggling starting unit. To expect the starters to be elite all the way through the season, healthy all the way through the season, I think is ludicrous. I just don't think that is a viable strategy. And so Denver is going to be tested. They're going if they're just putting in a seventh man, a ninth man, and the 12th man, if that's the expectation for the free agency additions that they're adding, I'm not sure that that's going to accomplish very much. But like, look, this is why I'm not in the front office, and they probably have a better idea of this than I do. But here's the quote. Here's the paragraph that I wrote right at the end of my article. I'm just going to read it verbatim. The Nuggets' new front office hasn't had to confront the idea that this group isn't good enough yet. The constant messaging has been that Denver's close. They've got a great starting five and just need to fill the holes behind those guys. Easier said than done. And also, the holes are getting bigger every year as the core gets further and further away from that championship. That's the actual justification in all of this, and I don't believe the Nuggets are correct in that thinking. The sentiment has been that because Denver won a championship before, that they can win again with the same group. And I have been pretty concerned about that line of thinking because everybody else around Denver has gotten better. Like the teams that are competing are way better than they were in 2023. And it just kind of feels like Denver's recreating. Feels like they're trying to recreate in the aggregate from a year where the entire NBA was down. Like 2023 wasn't a great year in the NBA. Denver won the Western Conference with 53 wins. OKC just won it with 68. Like the expectations should be, I think, a little different. But who knows? Uh, Comment here from Daikatana. If I were Jokic, would you be happy the way that ownership front office handled the franchise for the past few years? No. If I was Jokic, I wouldn't be happy. Now, I think about it from an American's perspective, from a U.S. person's perspective, and thinking, oh, well, they should be trying to maximize. They should be trying to be as efficient as possible. They should be trying to really bolster and can obviously keep looking at and constantly keep looking. I'm not sure if Jokic keeps like thinking about it like that. I actually very much doubt that he does. I think he thinks that they are pretty close to good enough and that certain things have to break their way in order to get it done. I also can't imagine that he's incredibly happy, which is why July 8th, when he can sign that extension or not, I think is going to be pretty interesting. He might just sign it. He might just sign it and they'll have the flexibility to attack this rebuild, this retooling the way that they want to. Um, but if he doesn't sign it, and the messaging is not that he's trying to save money, but more that he's concerned, the pressure will be applied en masse, like pretty quickly. So we'll see what it ultimately looks like. But I'm a little bit concerned about what's ultimately going to happen here. Thomas asks, have you thought about potential buyout guys like Kevin Love, Mike Conley, etc.? Not yet, but there are some bigger names out there, some big free agent names that are some contract names that would be big. God, the problem with the apron years that Denver is in is that if a player has a contract that is larger than the mid-level exception, which for this season is 14 million or so. If a player has a contract that is bought out that is larger than that, the Nuggets are ineligible to sign them because they are over the first apron. If you're over the first apron, if you're over the second apron, you cannot sign those guys. So Kevin Love would work. Mike Conley would work. Those guys are underneath that threshold. Mike Conley would be good for this team. I actually kind of like that. But in terms of Chris Middleton is a name that I've thought of, for example, Marcus Smart, guys like that in Washington. Those guys make over $14 million. So they are not eligible to be Nuggets after a buyout. So it's pretty limiting. It's one of the reasons why I haven't thought about it that strongly. But who knows? Maybe the right player comes to mind. Yeah, I think that Denver is in a really tough spot right now because they are able to comfortably tell themselves that they were very close, that they took the Thunder to 7 games, that they won a championship 2 years ago, that the only reason that they haven't won before was because of injuries, whether it was Jamal Murray's injury in 2024, whether it was Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter's injuries in 2025. Denver's going to be able to tell themselves, and they're not like flat out wrong, but they may not be right, that they can just turn it around and just get healthy and be fine in this upcoming season. I actually think that that's the wrong way to look at it. But then again, Michael Porter's not super tradable right now. Jamal Murray, probably not somebody they want to be trading right now. This is kind of the path of least resistance for Denver. It's the one that makes it easiest for them. And I don't think that, like, this job is not easy. It shouldn't be easy. And if it becomes easy because Denver plays really well, if they're more positive, then I'll eat my words. But when the playoffs come back around next year and Denver's struggling in the second round, I'm going to be like, yeah, this is what I expected. Jimenez asks, off topic, but what do you think about the Ace Bailey situation? I don't know. I don't know. Utah has been such a travesty of a rebuild over the course of these past couple of years that I can understand him not wanting to be there, and yet him trying to force his way to the Washington Wizards is ridiculous. Like that to me seems like a pretty awful ugly situation for a variety of reasons. But hey, he is in his right to do those things. And it was up to Utah. Like, if he was consistently projecting Ace Bailey that he would not come to Utah, that he would definitely not want to, like, be in Philly, for example. If he was projecting that he did not want to be in those places and that he would not play as well in those places, he wouldn't be happy in those places, then like it's on those front offices to make decisions. Uh, he's an 18-year-old. He'll get more mature. In 3 years, he'll be 21, which means that like he may have 3 full years of experience at that point, and Washington or Utah in this case might be a completely different situation than it is right now. And he might be the leader of it if he develops the way that he thinks he can. But do I expect that to happen? No. Guys like that, and especially guys with his kind of shooting profile and stats profile, not very likely to be successful in the NBA. And it just feels like he's not getting off to a great start from that perspective, and is not really like, he thinks he has all the time in the world. And I can tell from experience in watching a lot of these players, like Stanley Johnson thought he had all the time in the world for the Detroit Pistons back in 2015. And then he was not on the Detroit Pistons anymore. He was on the Miami Heat. He was bouncing around the league, and then he was out of the league. So things go very quickly in the NBA, and he better attack it. Like, he better not dawdle. Okay. Wade Skywalker asks, how would you feel about getting Trey Jones as a backup point guard for Jamal Murray? Reasonable, perfectly fine. That's not like the top name on my list for backup point guards. I think if I were to prioritize, it would be Malcolm Brogdon. I think I would prefer Tyus Jones over him. There's an argument to just get back Russell Westbrook instead of Trey Jones. But if the Nuggets are looking for somebody that is a little bit more fitting in rather than standing out, then Trey Jones would be perfectly fine. So if that's the direction that they went, perfectly reasonable. Okay, folks, I think that's going to do it. Obviously, very low key for Denver over the course of these past couple of days. Not something you necessarily want to hear about as a fan, but from a draft perspective, I'm not surprised, and I'm not really that like it shouldn't bother fans for Denver to not be super involved in the draft. Where you're going to get some concerns is how involved in free agency and trades they are. It could have been posturing last night. Maybe they are going to look at some trades and look at some trades for either the core four or some of their end of bench guys. We'll have to figure that out. But I do think that Denver at this point, much more likely to just sign 3 free agents, maybe a 4th if they create some space from Dario Saric, and let that be good. That would be my expectation. Okay, everybody, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by good friends here at Mile High Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. Trying to put out the best content that I possibly can for the Nuggets in this situation, and kind of knowing that I'm very much on an island in the way that I'm covering this and how I feel about this. So hopefully you're enjoying the content. Really do appreciate everybody for stopping by. All the regulars in the comments have been fantastic. Everybody have a great weekend. If the Nuggets do anything crazy, you'll obviously hear from me. I'll talk to you guys very soon.